Hello and welcome to the 1Q podcast by Blueprint, where we discuss what we think is the next wave of innovation for technology and businesses. This is a podcast where we ask our guests the one burning question about the future of digital transformation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the 1Q podcast with Blueprint Technologies, where we talk about what's happening in digital transformation in different industries and what's innovative in the market today. On today's podcast, we have Craig Grootenboer. He is our regional director out of our New York office, and he is actually in town. I thought I'd grab him a little bit of his time and have him share his vision for what's going on in the financial industry and what he thinks is going on in special in digital transformation. So welcome to the podcast, Craig.
Thanks, Ryan. Super excited to be here.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, love to. So I come to Blueprint from the financial services industry, where I've spent my career in various roles within retail and commercial banking as well as capital markets. Throughout my career, I've seen, I think a lot of us in financial services have seen a sort of a paradigm shift within the industry, where it went from very manual and high touch, face-to-face relations with clients to very automated and electronic, and the digital transformation is playing a huge part within that space. So, really excited to take the skill set that I have from capital markets and from financial services and apply it more into the technical realm, and specializing really in data and advanced analytics, which is really some of the hot topics within the financial services industry at this point.
Yeah, I think, we talk a lot about on this show about the different pressures that are affecting a lot of different industries, and I don't think a lot of people realize how much pressure is actually on the financial industry. Do you want to talk about kind of the state of the financial market and what's really driving some of that pressure?
Yeah, so after 2008, where we had the economic crisis, there was a big regulatory push. So a lot of the responsibilities on these financial services firms and a lot of the capital and resources was really dedicated over to that regulatory space and making sure they're compliant within that space. So you're dealing with large vats of data and really making sure that the data is really reconciled, accurate, dependable, because you're going to be handing that over to regulators, is really driven a lot of where we've gotten to today.
That's interesting. So they've been investing in compliance and not necessarily investing in the customer, I guess, then, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you have to do both things, right? Like, you need to stay compliant. At the same time, you have to keep the customer in mind. And a lot of those regulations really are focused on making sure that the banks keep the customer first and not the banks first. That's really what's driven a lot of this, especially when you talk about capital markets and trading, making sure that you're trading in the best interest of the customer, not the best interest of the bank. So there's been a lot of regulations around that specifically.
What are kind of the key indicators of the pressure that the banks and the financial industry are facing right now?
The key indicators, again, keeping the customer first, making sure that you're compliant within all those regulations. It's just a huge strain on the banks when you have to take all of your resources and really dedicate it, to being compliant. At the same time, the expectation, like, you have to be realistic, is how many resources can you dedicate over to the customer.
Yeah.
And then still you're trying to build a business and be profitable at the same time.
Right. Well, and the profitability, they must have a lot of pressure on their margins and what they can actually charge. And
right. No, exactly. And I think what you've seen with a lot of these markets going to a more automated state, an electronic state, is the margins are shrinking. Right. So it's harder to actually make money, and at the same time deliver a good product and be profitable. So it's a very challenging time for the banks. You can imagine the upper management of the banks is how do you sort of stay ahead of this, be compliant, and deliver the best product possible,
as well as then drive additional revenue, find additional revenue
exactly.
sources, and drive product to the bottom line.
Right. So you have to try to do all of that, within this tiny little space.
Well, that's a very common theme with a lot of different industries. We talk a little bit about oil and gas industry and how they're feeling that pressure because commodity pricing is down on oil. We also talk a little bit about, have had Romy and Tom on the show to talk about what's going on in the retail space. So if you had to recommend, you see the kind of the biggest need in the financial realm, like where do you think the banks and the other companies in the financial industry should be focusing their energy to be able to achieve that digital transformation, to be able to get that additional profit?
Yeah, I think it's really having full control over the information and the data. I think that's really important, and you've seen a lot of the banks that are trying to perform advanced analytics, right? See how they can be most profitable, which clients are profitable. It's got to make sense. So, when you start to talk about data and analytics from a bank, you can look at two different ways. You could look at it internally as far as performance. You're trying to get the best performance out of the people that work for you. And then from a consumer standpoint, right? Data and analytics could help you drive the proper product to a client, right? Yeah. So you become more efficient, and in terms, that's how you can increase your profitability. So, you're really keeping both in mind, and really controlling your data and really having a good understanding of it, making sure it's accurate. Because everything you're doing, you're basing every decision off that data.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine somebody going and making a trade, and they're making a trade off of bad data,
yeah,
that's a problem, right? And that happens. Or you go to a client and you're talking to a potential client about data that's incorrect. So, the efficiency and the need for accurate data and really understanding your data is incredibly important right now.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's probably one of those industries where speed and accuracy is equally important.
Right.
In most industries, you can either take one or the other, and you can sacrifice the other for different use cases, but they have to have both.
Yeah, when you start to talk about real time in financial services isn't almost real time. It's got to be real time, right? It's a game of speed. Who's getting the information the fastest, the data the fastest, and those are the people that are the most successful. So, it's really important. And as these markets and everything goes more electronic, it moves very quickly and very fluid. The timeliness of that data and the accuracy is incredibly important.
Awesome. So let me ask you one question then. The question that I have that's been interesting is we've been chatting about your opinion of the current state of banking is the parallel between banking as an industry and retail. So do you think the retail aspect of banking is going to go away? It's one of the areas where they have a high level of investment, and there's a high level of cost associated with a retail bank.
Yeah.
And they have a challenge being able to actually improve that customer experience. Do you think what do you think the retail banking side of things plays a role? Does it play a role going forward?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think we've seen that happen already. From my experience, I walk into a bank and it doesn't look like it did 2 years ago. There aren't tellers anymore. There's computers, or maybe is somebody that's just guiding you. But I think the expectation is, you have the millennials, and I think they like to do things themselves, right? So you want someone to come in, they're very, tech savvy. They want to come in and, push buttons on, a iPad or a touchscreen and just handle the transactions themselves. So I think you're seeing a paradigm shift within banking and retail that's just going to increase over time, I think. So I think what you're going to see is less and less retail banks and more like self-serve terminals.
Yeah, it's we talk a lot about retail, about how brick and mortar retailers have to have the opportunity to leverage their brick and mortar stores to enhance and create a new customer experience. Right. I wonder if banks have to take the same approach.
Yeah, I think I think it's shifting. The world we live in is totally shifting, where it's when you talk about the interaction between people is a lot less. It's person and machine, and they just I think they've found that the machines are very efficient, right? And a lot of times the people are what slow down and decrease the efficiency. So right. I think you're seeing the removal of the person, which is a little scary. It's like, how far do we go, right? Robotics, and you start to talk about AI and things like that. Yeah. Banking is just one industry. I think it's there. You're seeing it already.
When do you think Amazon gets in the banking world?
They probably have started to already. I would guarantee it.
I think Amazon Go for banks?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, awesome. That's great. Really appreciate you coming on the show. If anybody wants to reach out and talk about digital transformation, especially if you're in the New York market or if you're in any kind of the financial industry, you want to tell how people can get a hold of you?
Sure. You can reach me at craig@bpcs.com. That's CRAIG at bpcs.com. Or reach me, ping me on LinkedIn or, any of those platforms. And I'd love to continue the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show today. As we talked about before, this is the 1Q podcast with Blueprint Technologies, where we talk about what's new and interesting and innovative within the different industries and digital transformation. Talk to you next week.